Hello, welcome to this how-to video on reassembling the 17F60 Flomax pump air motor. Tools used are listed here, along with Loctite 577 and white Kluber grease for lubrication. Not all tools will be needed for this assembly. We will be replacing the seals using Air Motor Seal Kit 144919904. To begin, we will install the fork bearing onto the air motor piston assembly, which has already been assembled using the 2 plates and mounting bolt securing the plate to the piston rod. You will want to use a vise to secure the assembly using a rag or other soft material to protect the rod. We will begin by lubricating with the white grease the seal and bearing plate, and underneath that we will put the paper gasket. Then using the 3 screws, you'll get your 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench and secure the bearing assembly to the plate. Then you'll take your lubricated with the white grease seal O-ring and put that onto the piston assembly plate, using more white grease to lubricate the outside. You will also want to put a slight film of grease onto the piston rod itself. Now on the lower flange, we're going to insert the O-ring and seal to the inside of the flange. Using a little bit of grease, you'll tuck the O-ring into the groove. You'll put a little extra grease on the outside of the O-ring, and then you'll take the plastic sleeve. Using your fingers with some more grease, you'll tuck that down in there. And if need be, you can use the needle nose pliers to slightly twist, and then use your fingers to tuck the rest of the way down. And if you can, use something round. And in this video, we'll actually use our pick handle to help smooth and tuck that sleeve into the groove in front of the O-ring. And then you'll want to apply a little bit more grease to that area after the sleeve is in. Then you'll take the cylinder seal O-ring and put that into the groove, applying more grease to it after it's in the groove. Then you'll want to wipe away the excess using a rag. Next is the fork sleeve bushing. You'll want to take one of the yellow O-rings and tuck it down into the groove using a little bit of the white grease to help. Make sure it's seated well. And once that's seated, then you can stick it into the port on the lower flange and use something to the circumference of the sleeve. For this video, we're using one of the upper body fluid section screws and a rubber mallet to tap the sleeve all the way in to the lower flange. And you'll do the same with the upper flange. You'll tuck the O-ring in to the sleeve, little grease, and then again use the mallet and something in the diameter to tap. You don't have to tap too hard, you just want to make sure it's aligned and make it flush to the flange. Then you'll put the upper flange cylinder seal O-ring into the groove and use a little of the grease to lubricate the outside. And then you will use the white grease also to lubricate the inside of the cylinder. Then you'll take your fork and you'll insert it through the top of the upper flange, and you'll take one of the two C-clips and put it in the groove for the upper portion of the fork. And then you'll take your lubricated sleeve and slide that up into the groove. And you'll take your piston assembly with fork bearing, put a little lubrication on that, hold the fork, and you will slide the piston assembly up through the fork and into the cylinder. And you'll make sure that the cylinder is seated. Then you'll take the second C-clip and put it on the bottom groove of the fork to secure the piston and fork assembly. Tighten up and align everything, and then you'll take the lower flange and insert that over the piston rod and fork assembly through the fork sleeve. Make sure everything is tight and aligned. And then you will take your 4 tie rod nuts and assemble them using a 13mm open end wrench to tighten them. Then you will flip the air motor over once that is tightened, and you'll take the bolt for the bracket to the lower flange and you'll tighten that down with the 13mm. And then the airline fitting going to the lower flange, you'll tighten that up using the 14mm open end wrench. We will now assemble the reversing block. You'll begin by inserting the lever seal into the port, and then from the other side you'll insert the lever. You'll want to lubricate the stem of the lever and then make sure that the O-ring stays in place. And then back to the other side, you'll put in the paper gasket, and then the valve plate itself goes on top. Put a little bit of grease on the plate and on the bottom of the valve. And then you'll put the valve into place, and there is a metal key, helps with the alignment. Then you'll take your spring and your brass cap, insert those on top of the valve, and once you have the spring and cap aligned, you will push down on the brass cap and take your cotter pin and slide it through the orifice, through to the other side. Then you'll take your needle nose and separate and spread the cotter pin to secure the brass cap and spring to the valve assembly. Then you'll take your valve cap and put the seal O-ring into the groove using some white grease. And then you will take your 4 screws to attach the cap using the 5mm Allen wrench to tighten and secure the 4 screws. Once that's complete, you'll get the 3 O-rings and you'll insert those into the bottom of the valve base. And you can use a little bit of grease to assure that they stay in the groove. Now we will mount it to the motor itself. I'm going to put some grease onto the fork and onto the fork spring. And you're going to take your valve assembly, the reversing block, and you're going to slide the fork onto the lever first without tightening the screws. And once the fork spring is on the lever, you can tighten down the screws using a 6mm Allen wrench. Then you're going to take your muffler bracket and sponge, and with the two 10mm bolts, you're going to tighten them with the 10mm wrench. And once those are tightened and installed, you can now put on the outer cover. You're going to want to line that with the two bolts to the top of the muffler bracket, and using a 5mm Allen wrench, you're going to secure the two bolts to the air motor. And that will conclude the reassembly of the 17F60 Flomax pump air motor. Thank you.